Hi guys! So I'm recording this video today because, as you would have seen on my Instagram and other social media, I've been doing a lot of, I guess, introspective thinking and reflections and whatnot, and I really want to start making some active choices about my life and the things that happen around me. And because I guess, we all have different circumstances in life. And one of the circumstances that affect me is that I have a chronic illness. And it's a chronic illness that is not very well understood, not even by doctors, and let alone the general public. And it has had a big impact on me and my life choices and in just many things that I do on my day-to-day. And I'm not the only one. It actually affects a lot of people. So I decided that I needed to talk about this. I've always been very open about it. Like, I don't try to hide it or anything like that. I'm not ashamed of it or anything like that, but a lot of people do, and it's hard when you have a chronic illness for people to understand, particularly the illness that I have, which is fibromyalgia. Oh, by the way, I'm not apologizing for my pajamas. It's cold and miserable in the UK. It's been raining, howling wind, awful. It's super cold, and actually this is an aspect of my illness that may seem silly, but is very important for me on a day-to-day basis, which is comfort and warmth actually make a huge difference. But anyway, I'm gonna get into it now. Today is gonna be more of a general sort of introduction to just getting to know the illness and how it can affect people, and this type of things. And then every Friday, at least until Fibromyalgia Day, which is actually on the 12th of May, I believe, this year, I'm gonna be posting every single Friday under the hashtag Fibro Friday to just talk about it and hopefully encourage some discussions and some better understanding. Right, so first of all, fibromyalgia is actually a neurological condition, even though a lot of people out there, including healthcare practitioners and specialists, may try to tell you that that's not true and it's a musculoskeletal disorder. Well, last time I checked, a problem with my pain receptors has to do with nerve endings, and it's generally now commonly agreed that it is some form of neurological or neuropathic disorder. And it kind of comes from the name itself as well. Just putting my historian hat here for a moment. So fibromyalgia, it kind of comes to say that the fibers in your body, fibro, suffer an algia, which we get from the Greek, which literally means some form of pain or discomfort. It's not exactly the fibers in your body that actually suffer this discomfort. Like I said, it's your neuronal receptors. So usually your nerve endings and your neurons. What happens when you have fibromyalgia is that due to a chemical imbalance in your brain, or at least we think it's a chemical imbalance in your brain, your nerve endings and your neurons don't necessarily catch the pain receptors normally. Like, I have a pencil here, right? And you would think this shouldn't hurt, right? Because the pencil isn't going through my skin, it should be fine. Yeah. However, someone with fibromyalgia may have a bad day, do this, and they may just think that their hand is literally falling apart. I'm not joking, I'm not exaggerating. I mean, I didn't actually suffer any pain from that, but it is all based on how those nerve endings actually receive this information, okay? Pain is an information that our brain processes, just like everything else. And like I was recently taught, pain is not just something that you perceive. There is an aspect of pain that is also based on previous experiences, on how much something has hurt. That's the reason why sometimes when little kids fall down to the floor and they hurt their bums, they don't necessarily cry, they are just more like shocked, like they don't know what's happened, because they may have not experienced that before, or their brain hasn't been able to pick up this information just yet to realize, ouch, that hurt, that means danger. Because pain, at the end of the day, what it is for humans and for animals, as a biological response, is an alarm. It's saying, ow, 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 something is not good for you. It's a survival defense mechanism, essentially. So what happens when you have fibromyalgia is that trigger alert, it's a bit more heightened than in most people. So something that shouldn't hurt, perhaps it hurts you a lot. And you have no control over that pain. It's not imaginary. A lot of people think this doesn't happen, that you're making it up. Not at all. Your brain, your neurons, your central nervous system triggers, like if you just got stabbed by a sword or a cutting knife or anything like that. And therefore, the reaction that your body generates from a biological point of view is exactly that. So it's very severe. It affects people in different ways. There is different magnitudes. It depends on the day. It can be very, very different from person to person and from day to day. Even though it's a chronic illness and it stays with you for your entire life, it's ups and downs. It's not necessarily a constant. It comes up and down, and it very much depends on your other circumstances and how it affects you. That is the main sort of symptom of fibromyalgia. Then there is another one which is very much associated with it, which is chronic fatigue, and they come hand in hand. Again, because of the pain receptors and how your neurons work and process information, some days you just feel knackered. And getting out of bed is a genuine struggle. And not just getting out of bed, just doing anything. Because imagine how you would feel if your brain was convinced that you were not just in pain, but also so tired, like you've never slept. It would be impossible for you to operate. You wouldn't be functional. And that doesn't only have physical repercussions, it also affects your brain and how you actually process information. So most fibromyalgia patients suffer from something called fibrofog, or we call it fibrofog, us cool kids. And it's sort of a cognitive malfunction, which comes to mean that your brain essentially just does blah. You are perfectly able to understand, things normally, but your brain is just having a slow moment that actually understand what you're reading, saying, talking about. Even just put words in your mouth that you would normally be able to say. You may just actually need to think really hard about what you're saying or doing, which is not a lot of fun, particularly not when you're already in pain and super tired. So it can be very challenging. I mean, that's understatement of the year, but it can be very challenging and it's not very easy to manage. Now, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that fibromyalgia actually affects a really high percentage of the population. It's something like 1 in every 25 women in the UK suffer from fibromyalgia, which is a pretty big number. However, many of them are not diagnosed because it's an illness that is very difficult to actually get a proper diagnosis for. And usually it comes through as a diagnosis by elimination, which means you go through this hideous process of going through many different departments to check what's wrong with you. And eventually, when nothing else ticks the box, they tell you, okay, cool, you have fibromyalgia. Cheers, thanks, bye. It's not the greatest way of actually being told that you have an illness, and actually sometimes that leads to misdiagnosis, not just for people with fibromyalgia, but other people that may not have what they think they have, and they actually have fibromyalgia. It happens a lot to people with MS or with other types of chronic pain or illness, simply because there is a lot of overlap, and it's just difficult to sort of establish the perimeters of the illness. But that's how we live. That's how we do. And those are, to say, the main symptoms. And there are a lot of other sort of secondary symptoms that affect different people in different ways. And this is what I really want everyone to understand about fibromyalgia. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of illness. The way it impacts everybody is very different. And it has to do not just with your physiology, but your mental health, your general surroundings, your lifestyle, everything. So there is actually a lot of things we can do to help ourselves, but in order to do so, you really need to come to know yourself really well, and sometimes in ways you may not necessarily have thought about it before. And that's really where the big challenge comes. You kind of need to relearn every single aspect of your life in order to help yourself. There is no cure for fibromyalgia. There is only treatments, and the vast majority of the treatments only work on 50% of the patients. In my case, they don't work at all. Or if they do, the side effects are so severe that I become a vegetable. So I have two options. I can manage it without any medication whatsoever, which is essentially what I do now, apart from ordinary painkillers, or I can take some really hardcore drugs that will leave me incapacitated in bed, unable to know who I am, where I am, or what day it is. I don't know you, but that's not a particularly thrilling life prospect. So I don't take them. Not just that, I had some very bad reactions to several of the different treatments that I could have taken. They just don't agree with me. I'm pretty small. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I'm tiny. I hardly measure 5 foot, and I'm pretty petite. So, a lot of those drugs can have a very serious impact on someone like me. Essentially, I count as a child size for most things. So, these things just simply knock me out, and it just doesn't work. So the only way I have to manage this illness is by just changing my lifestyle, which is what I've done for the last several years of my life. I was originally diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 2015, but I started developing symptoms at the age of 17. That was almost 8 years prior to my diagnosis, and that's actually very early on for someone with fibromyalgia to display symptoms, which is, just an added extra, because at the age of 18, I didn't know what was happening to me. I just was in pain. And very tired. I would suffer all sorts of random side effects. I would be perfectly fine one moment and then completely spaced out the next one. It just wasn't very good. I was going through my college applications. I was studying in Spain, and I wanted to come to UK for university, which meant I actually did the international baccalaureate. And because back at the time in Spain, international baccalaureate was not fully official, that meant I had to do 2 baccalaureates at the same time. And that's a lot of hours, in case you don't know. In Spain, we actually have 11 subjects per bachiller, as we call it, which is a baccalaureate, instead of like the 5 A levels or something like that most people have here at most. So I had to do your 5 A levels plus my 11 subjects all in one. No convalidations, just go, go, go. So I was pretty much doing work from 7 a.m. till 3 a.m. in some cases, particularly during exam periods. And it seems, we don't really know exactly how fibromyalgia happens or how it gets triggered or anything, but it seems that the stress, obviously, of that process just triggered that in me. It's very likely that in my case, fibromyalgia is genetic because it runs in the family, or at least we think it runs in the family from other diagnoses. So it's just very likely that I just got unlucky. I had the unhappy gene, and under specific circumstances, my central nervous system decided, this is too much, girl, stop. And that's how it started. So yeah, it originally started affecting me in my hands a lot, and it still does to this day, and my feet, which actually meant I had to give up through time a lot of things I really loved doing because it was very difficult, and because until I had my diagnosis, I just simply didn't know if I was about to break my hands or if they just hurt randomly. I didn't know what I could do to make it stop. So it's really, really difficult having something that causes you these issues, but you don't really know what it is. And a lot of people out there are in that situation. It's interesting because fibromyalgia is a lot easier to diagnose in women than men. So a lot of men out there with fibromyalgia don't even know it. And it's because of biological markers that just make it a lot harder for those people to be diagnosed by that process of elimination with the illness. So if you know someone with fibromyalgia or with some of the symptoms that I just described to you, just try to keep that in mind, because not knowing what's actually happening to your body, to the extent of sometimes thinking, am I just going to collapse or just break now, can be really terrifying. It really puts a lot of limitations, psychological limitations that you're sometimes not aware of, because you just become scared that anything that you may be doing could actually cause you more harm than any benefit. So this is also one of the reasons why I wanted to start doing these videos, to sort of increase that awareness, get other people on board and helping others, because it is really through that support and those other people giving you the extra help, even if it's just from an emotional point of view, that most of us actually make it through our day-to-days. And without that support network, we wouldn't be able to operate. So if you know anyone out there with these symptoms or with fibromyalgia itself, just try to put yourself in their shoes, which will probably be very comfy shoes, by the way. But just learn to develop that empathy, because it's not a visible illness. And like I said, because it varies so much from day to day, it's not like you can prepare or predict when you're gonna have it. You may have some symptoms that may let you know, ooh, a flare is coming, or something specifically triggers you and it just makes it worse. But it is hard. So anyway, back to it. Today I purely wanted to talk about the medical side of things, and I'm already starting to run out of time. So some of the other things that actually happen to people with fibromyalgia. A lot of people with fibromyalgia develop irritable bowel syndrome, which obviously makes the whole fatigue and pain a lot worse, because if you're not absorbing nutrients properly, the chemicals in your brain cannot, reset themselves and help you move on and leave that feeling of pain and fatigue. A lot of people develop extreme sensitivity to different sensory inputs, particularly drastic temperature changes. I suffer from that a lot, hence my fluffy pajamas, because it's like my thermostat is broken and I don't necessarily know when I'm getting too cold or when I'm getting too hot. And the change from one to the other is very, very severe, and I end up actually fainting, passing out, blacking out. Is not pleasant. Not pleasant at all. Severe weather changes, like the weather that we have in the UK. One moment is bright, sunny, and happy sunshine and warmth, and the next time you're freezing and rain. That can have a severe impact as well. Drastic changes in light, drastic noises, very acute smells or flavors can trigger fibromyalgia as well. Like there are certain sweeteners I cannot have, certain foods I can't have, not just because of the taste, but because of how then my gut deals with it. It just doesn't work, and it just makes me incredibly ill. You suffer from sleep deprivation, poor sleep habits, because you struggle to get comfortable in bed. So again, that has a double effect, as by night is when your brain resets those chemicals. If you can't sleep properly, they don't balance, back to step one. So all of those things create a cycle of doom in which you just get caught, and they just end up sort of feeding into each other. And as a side effect of that, then fibromyalgia ends up developing a lot of other comorbidities. A lot of people think that immediately because you have fibromyalgia, you have mental health disorder. That's not necessarily the case. But obviously, as I'm sure you can understand, if you're as much in pain or fatigue, like I've described, on a day-to-day basis, you may start having self-doubts about yourself. You may become depressed or anxious. Certain things will just not sit well with you. The same with sleeping. Sleep deprivation does horrible things to your brain. So there are other aspects there, and it all varies. But those are some of the main or the key symptoms that we have with fibro. And those are particularly the ones that affect me as well. So there you go. This is just a sort of quick introduction, and how it happens and why it happens, or at least in my case, it doesn't happen, like I said, it doesn't happen the same way for everyone, but at least now you know how it can be. And I'm sure I don't look ill to you. I don't feel ill, yet I am. So just I hope that starts making some sense, and that you realize how this works. And if you have someone in your life that suffers from this illness, or that may be suffering from this illness but they are not diagnosed, you can understand some of the things that can affect them and how to help them out. And I think that's gonna be all for today, just because you've probably been watching already for a really long time. But I will come back to talk about other things, such as how these things affect our day-to-day, common side effects of fibromyalgia in our day-to-day life, hobby life, and how does that not actually always work out, and what people can do to help themselves, because you're probably not going to be able to get a lot of help from doctors in most cases. They are not always able to help because our illness is such an unknown. But we can learn from each other, and that's the way I've learned most. But also learning from ourselves as well. Listen to your body, because your body knows best. And that's all for today. Thank you guys for listening, and have a good cozy day. All right, bye.